Hello, and welcome to another edition of All Tech is Humans live stream series, where every other week we dig into thorny tech and society issues in meaningful conversations shaping our responsible tech future. I'm Sandra Khalil, Associate Director of All Tech is Human. If you're new here, welcome. All Tech is Human is a nonprofit organization committed to building the relational infrastructure sustaining the responsible tech ecosystem. We connect diverse voices, surface interdisciplinary insights, and help people break in and grow within the responsible tech ecosystem. So, whether you're coming from tech, policy, academia, advocacy work, or creative fields, there's definitely a seat for you at this table. Our live streams happen bi weekly and are just one way that we spark the interest in conversations with the community. If you're looking to get more involved in our community, you can join our very vibrant Slack community. We have over 12,000 people across over 100 countries around the world, and it's filled with folks really in this discipline and approaching the tech issues from different sectors. You can also attend one of our upcoming gatherings. We have curated US-based convenings and also virtual discussions like these. And they're really designed for this sort of connection and collaboration among people in the field. And finally, you can bring the conversation local by organizing an ATIHX meetup. Those are independently organized meetups around the world by All Tech is Human community members. So you can bring that to your city or community and convene together. So today's topic is a fascinating and important one: companion chatbots and sort of unjustified attachments to AI. As AI systems become more conversational, more persistent, and maybe even a little emotionally intelligent, we're starting to see a rise in users forming deeper connections with these tools. So today we're going to discuss what happens when these attachments can go too far, what implications exist when we're creating AI like this, and how do we create more accountability and transparency in the conversation around them. So we'll be diving into these questions with a group of folks that have been thinking really deeply about this. Be sure to drop your thoughts in the chat for our Q&A portion at the end of the discussion. And now I'm pleased to bring our moderator for today's live stream on, Ms. Rose Guingrich. She is All Tech is Humans Grad Futures Social Impact Fellow at Princeton University and a PhD student and AI researcher. So Rose, I'll bring you on now. How's it going? Oh, you're muted, Rose. I unmuted you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sandra, for the introduction. And thank you everyone who is online tuning in. And so what I'm going to do real quick is just give an introduction for all of our panelists. We're so excited to have them here today. We have Dr. Henry Shevlin, Kim, and Sam all joining us to provide their input from different sectors on companion chatbots and this constantly changing environment with these AI tools. So to begin, for each of our panelists, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about you. Tell us where you're coming from, what industry you're in, and the capacity in which you engage with companion chatbots. And also, as a side note, add kind of a word that describes how you think about companion chatbots, whether it be apprehensive, excited, hopeful, or concerned. So I'll turn it over to Kim to start.
Thank you, Rose, and pleasure to be connected with all of you there virtually. I'm thrilled to be a part of this conversation. So again, I'm Kim Malfacini. I work at OpenAI on our product policy team. That team does a few different things, part of which is we help work across the company to ensure that products and models OpenAI deploy are built responsibly and shipped safely. I also work on usage policies. So once our policies are out, once our models and products are out in the world, what are the policies that govern their use by users and developers? Alongside that work, I just wrapped up a master's in studies at the University of Cambridge, working very closely with Dr. Henry Shevlin in the area of AI ethics and society. And I'll just make a very brief plug for that program if anyone's interested in thinking about it. I'm very glad to have done it and would highly recommend it. As part of that course, I wrote a dissertation on the impacts of human AI relationships on human-human relationships, which is an area of really deep interest for me. That paper notably was not focused on the general purpose chatbots like a ChatGPT or Claude, more so focused on the replica, know-me type, very kind of intended for companionship apps. And I'm very excited to share that research was recently published. Very excited to share what I've learned through that process.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kim.
Oh, and my word.
Yes.
I'm gonna pick from the options you shared with us, and my one word will be concerned.
Gotcha. Thank you so much, Kim, for that. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Henry for your introduction.
Thanks, Rose. And thanks, Sandra, as well, for hosting us here today. And thanks, Sam and Kim, for joining us. I'm really excited to be here. So I'm Henry Shevlin. I'm the Associate Director of the Leverhulme Centre for the Future of Intelligence at the University of Cambridge. CFI, for short, is the university's main AI ethics theory policy institute. And I'm a philosopher, AI ethicist. I actually cut my teeth working on issues in the cognitive science of AI primarily, and cognitive science of also animal minds, basically trying to understand all forms of non-human cognition and how to think about them. And my big fascination at the outset was AI consciousness, but having been completely swept along with the exciting things happening in generative AI and large language models over the last 4 years, a major focus of my current research is AI companions, or a term that I've been trying to make happen, social AI, because I think that captures the fact that the line between AI companion apps versus more AI language assistants isn't always super clear. So social AI it's kind of more like a mass noun than a count noun, and I feel it captures these kind of diverse use cases and these diverse ways in which this human AI relationships are rapidly dawning on us. And I'm delighted to be here with Kim and Rose, both whom I know very well. I'm delighted to meet Sam. I guess my word, I was just trying to think what a good word would be, and I asked Claude and ChatGPT just now, and I couldn't get. I wanted something like apprehensive, but a bit more neutral, sort of a sense of both massive positive potential and massive negative potential. And the best I got is expectant, which may sound like I'm pregnant, but like I'm still going to go with expectant as the closest to capturing where I'm at with social AI.
Excellent word. Thank you, Henry. And thanks to Claude and ChatGPT for helping you think of that. Okay, thank you so much for the introduction and telling us a little bit about your background and the capacity you work with companion chatbots. And lastly, I'll hand it over to Sam for the introduction.
Hey everyone, my name is Sam Heiner, and I'm the Executive Director and co-founder of the Young People's Alliance. I'm currently a senior at UNC Chapel Hill, and I graduate in about 2 weeks, after which I'll be going full-time with YPA, so super excited for that. As an organization, our mission is to essentially be the AARP for young people and broadly empower young people. But through that work, we found that responsible technology really has been a focus area for us, starting with social media, just because in terms of the people in our organization, we found that we had these very similar experiences of the harms that we'd experienced and wanted to do something about it. And now that's expanded to AI companions, where we see these risks of further exacerbating the loneliness crisis that's already been caused by social media, and want to think of ways that we can preserve our humanity in the digital age and use AI for good. In terms of the work that we do policy advocacy at the federal and state levels in the US. We also do organizing across 30 campuses in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Tennessee. And then we do policy research on various issues as well. In terms of the word that I think of when it comes to AI, I think for AI in general, I would say excited. I think there are many transformative applications that we shouldn't necessarily dismiss, even though we're taking things from a more responsible tech lens. At the same time, when it comes to AI companion chatbots in particular, I'm extremely scared, would be my word. I think that it's going to be very hard to build those correctly and put the right guardrails in place so that those are actually designed to make us better people rather than to provide short-term benefits at a long-term expense. But looking forward to this conversation and excited to see everyone.
Thank you, Sam. And so you are both excited and scared. So we have a mix of words here when it comes to companion chatbots, which I think is fitting for the landscape that we're in currently. So to start for questions, and during this time, if you have a burning response to any of the questions that I pose, feel free to raise your hand, and otherwise I will just go through one by one. But I want to know, how are you and others on your team in your sector currently thinking about the design, deployment, or oversight of AI companions? And what sorts of conversations and priorities are shaping your approach to these questions? All right, I'll go ahead and start with Sam.
All right. Yeah, I think for us right now, there's sort of two conversations at play. It's obviously very early, so we're still determining what the exact path is. And I think this question's up in the air for a lot of the civil society community right now. But in general, I think the biggest goal is just to say with these like AI companions like Replica, Character.ai, and others that are clearly claim to be marketed as like loneliness reducing tools, but in practice are designed to cater to lonely people and encourage them to use the platform as some sort of like relief from loneliness without giving them the tools they might need to build relationships in real life. And we fear, and I think a lot of research shows this as well, potentially atrophying those ability to build relationships when you're talking to somebody who is, or a chatbot who is sort of sycophantic and always agreeing with you. That's our concern. And so at the very least, we want standards to be implemented to say that if this bot is built to be an AI companion, it should be built with these therapeutic standards in mind. It should be regulated as a medical device, for example, and be required to show efficacy at actually reducing loneliness or making people happier in the long term before it's given to consumers. That's strand one. Strand two, I would say people are very, excuse me, people are very concerned about losing their humanity in the age of AI. Like, it's very easy to imagine a world in 20 years where you work with like AI companions all day to get your work done, and then you DoorDash food and you never see the person or the automatic AI driven car that delivers the food. And then you talk to your AI companion at night and there's just no human interaction. That feels like a very real future and a very scary one as well. So that's something that we're thinking about too, is more broadly, how do we not just say like this is the specific policy, but how do we create a cultural movement that can really define what we want our humanity to look like in the age of AI?
Sam, you bring up some excellent points. And the point about atrophying of certain skills is something that Kim talked about in her recent paper. Kim, do you have anything to add or give us information on for how your team or your sector is thinking about these same sorts of questions?
Absolutely. I won't pretend to speak for the entirety of the sector. I'll say outside of my OpenAI capacity, I think I'm part of what I would call an informal network of folks in academia broadly that are investigating these questions, right? All of us here, very likely many of those who are tuning in, just having this conversation, fostering the discourse on it, drawing attention to it, all of that is part of identifying both the problems, defining what problematic use looks like, as well as articulating the positive vision. Like Sam said, if we kind of can't have an idea in our minds of how this technology is going to serve us well, Sherry Turkle uses the term cherish humanity alongside pursuing AI, which I think is absolutely beautiful, right? So part of it is absolutely driving discourse on and fostering, kind of interest in this topic. On the OpenAI side of the house, OpenAI has recently put out a study alongside MIT looking into what we are calling affective use. So use of ChatGPT that is kind of emotional in some form or fashion. And that runs a really, really wide gamut. That study, which I hope maybe we can share in the comments of this post, that is one of the ways in which OpenAI, and of course then our partners at MIT, were trying to start to answer empirically the question of what are the impacts of emotional uses of these tools. What are they over a period of time? How does usage change? How do people change? What are the impacts to loneliness, to social motivation? And what I would say right now, broadly is that we know so very little about this space. And, despite the wonderful work of folks on this call and many others, I think my kind of biggest interest right now is in driving more interest in this space such that we can further dig into empirical analysis to inform responsible development.
Absolutely, I second that. Being a researcher myself, I'm always on board with more empirical evidence in this space. So this is a call to those in the audience who are interested in this research to also get on board and provide information to researchers on what needs to be addressed. So with that in mind, passing it over to Henry, who has done a lot of thinking in this space. Let's hear your thoughts.
Awesome. Thank you, Rose. Okay, so just to quickly promote a few other things I've done in this space. So I've had 2 publications in the last couple of years trying to drive an interdisciplinary ethics conversation around social AI. Maybe I'll drop links to those in the chat shortly. I'm also very excited to be leading a unit of kind of an online journal for Oxford University Press at the moment as part of their AI intersection series, an interdisciplinary online publication series. And I'm leading their AI and relationships division. So we've commissioned over more than 20 papers in the last 12 months on how humans relate to AI. And we have a wide variety of topics, everything from the way human AI relationships are portrayed in fiction to empirical work, looking at sort of some of the kind of psychological factors that influence people's use to more philosophical issues about the value of these things. And that's still running. We're going to be doing another big call for papers soon. So anyone who's interested in writing in this about this on this topic, and if you're looking for a venue for publication, keep an eye out for that. That's the Oxford University Press AI Intersection series. I'm also writing a book for Cambridge University Press as part of their Elements series on ethics of social AI, trying to create a kind of initial roadmap for navigating the ethical issues in this space. So that's the kind of pitching out the way. I wanted to completely agree with what everyone said, but I can particularly Kim. I completely agree that this is an area where we just know so little. And I think it's really important not to do too much armchair theorizing about the impact of this very diverse set of tools and apps on society or individuals. So one little analogy I like to suggest is if you went back to 1970 and told people, we've got these 2 technologies that really become mainstream. One of them is video games, allows people to experience violent combat, shoot people in the head online, any kind of extreme graphic content you want. And the other is this platform that allows people to share ideas and have conversations with strangers from around the world. Which of those do you think is going to have more serious negative social impacts? Right? It's like clearly video games sound like they're going to be so bad for us, but it turns out like the data on video games is really equivocal. Certainly, we don't see any strong correlations between video game usage and real world violence, whereas social media is okay. There's still some controversy, but I mean, obviously has some very negative effects, particularly in teens. And I think maybe some people got lucky and called that in advance, but I think it's something that's very hard to draw, make concrete claims about without actually getting some more data. Now, there is a growing body of data on this, to which Rose and Kim have contributed. I think in moving, actually, I'll just quickly flag one thing that was a big surprise to me. I discussed in one of my papers is that despite some of the very serious headlines and negative incidents we've seen around social AI, the typical user experiences, at least as far as we can tell, seem to be predominantly positive and seem to, again, going on the limited data we have, seem to actually improve people's social relationships. But there are some limitations with the data we have already because this is such a new field. Most studies currently are cross-sectional studies. They're not longitudinal studies. They rely on self-selected subjects. They rely on self-report measures, life satisfaction judgments, self-reported well-being. So I think what we really need now is high-powered longitudinal studies, ideally where you assign people randomly to conditions of, go away and talk to Replica for 6 months. if you can get that past the review board, and really seeing what causal impacts these things have on people's relationships rather than relying on self-selection. And I think it's only when we start getting that that we'll get a better sense of how to design these systems in a way that does have positive consequences, or at least avoids the most serious negative consequences.
Thank you, Henry. And well, I just completed a study where I randomly assigned people to interact with a companion chatbot for 3 weeks. So those results will be out in the next couple of months. But we definitely need more of this data, similarly to social media and these other sorts of digital technologies that Sam in his advocacy is quite familiar with, in terms of we need more research and we need to establish our advocacy within research to understand what sorts of next steps that we need to take. So with that in mind, go ahead, Sam. Yeah.
Thanks. Just to jump in there a little bit, definitely, I think that need for more research is very apparent. And props to all of you on this call for doing that research and making that happen, because that really fuels our work. One thing I would note, though, is that I do think in some cases we need to move faster rather than sort of saying, all right, we got to wait to see what the research says. Because while we can't, necessarily predict entirely what the future is going to look like, we can follow the incentives. And so like with social media, for example, when you add in manipulative recommendation algorithms, like I think was pretty clear to see where the end of the road was, that we'd have some massive issues when it came to, loneliness, anxiety, depression, and things like that. By the same token, if these companies are incentivized to keep people on the platform for as long as possible or to make people emotionally dependent, then I think we very quickly run into a future that looks a lot like social media, but even worse. So I think that's the one area where, from a policy perspective, I think it's also important that we move fast, because we've seen it with social media, is that once these companies became big tech, once they started being called that, it was a lot harder to regulate them, because they're spending hundreds, maybe thousands of times of what we're spending on lobbying against the regulations that are needed. And this is a cultural moment where we could actually do something about AI companions before it goes off the rails in the same way.
You make a great point, Sam. And we also have the voice of the public, right? So what the public wants with respect to these tools, that's also a very valuable key point in this discussion, not just the research as well. So with this in mind, given the potential pitfalls of companion chatbots, I want to pose the question of what pitfall do you think is most significant or comes first to mind? And what sorts of guardrails might you suggest to mitigate the risks of this?
So I'll jump in here and say one thing that is, I think, increasingly apparent, and this is a finding from the OpenAI MIT study, that most people in the ChatGPT context, apart from the specific companion AI context, most people actually aren't using ChatGPT for emotional discussion. It's not a tool that is built specifically for that. But we found a long tail of users for whom greater usage, longer duration of usage was associated with more emotional discussion. Now, that study didn't look at causality in any way, but there's an association there that I think also feels intuitive. And I think it was brought up as well that I think, Sam, you touched on the loneliness epidemic. There's, possibly a scenario wherein people are coming to these tools looking for a certain something. And if it is companionship, well, then they're likely to find it. I think what I'm getting at is that there's possibly a subsection of people for whom this technology poses greater dangers by virtue of vulnerabilities that they have. I think about it a little bit like health comorbidities, right? If you're coming to this tool and you've got a pre-existing condition, if you will, isolation, loneliness, possibly a series of mental health challenges, you may be more vulnerable than the average individual. Now, I don't have an immediate solution to that. Companies very likely don't have information on, baseline levels of loneliness for their users. But I'm increasingly interested in ways in which this technology can help reflection among individuals. And that could that could pose benefits in a bunch of different ways. There's very likely a lot of AI coaching apps already doing this. But if we were to give people kind of an indication of, hey, you've now been using the chat for this long, or, hey, your usage has really crept up over the last few weeks. I'm an avid user, for instance, of the Apple app screen time limiter, and I find it enormously beneficial. That kind of, preserving of user autonomy. I set the limits, I define the apps and the time. So I'm preserving my autonomy, but it's also kind of built into the technology. It's saying, hey, in the moment, are you doing what the Kim of tomorrow wants, the Kim of yesterday established? How can we use this technology to force reflection against our own goals?
Great. If I can hop in here, I completely share Kim's worry about the idea that there might be a small subset of users for whom this technology is not fun or does not contribute positively to their lives, but can be incredibly destructive. And I think identifying who those users are, I think the same is probably true of other technologies. Like, I think we all know people whose brains have been destroyed by social media, but I think probably there are greater acute risks for subsets of users in the case of social AI compared to other digital tools. I guess a broader category of concern I have is the impact of social AI on young people, and this is something there's so little data on currently. I just think back to when I was 14. I was in GeoCities chat rooms and having conversations with people all around the world, and I loved the freedom and opportunities created by the internet, by early 90s internet. And it was and I can totally imagine that if I was a 13-year-old today, I would be obsessed. I would be so easily sucked in to social AI platforms. And I guess I find that particularly concerning, not because there's necessarily anything bad wrong with it. Like I said, many of my best social experiences in my teens were with people I never got to meet in real life, people I met in hobbyist chat rooms, for example. But I think just because it's such an important developmental period for people's minds and social identities, the impact of social AI on that kind of critical window and how that might shape people's lifelong attitudes towards others, I think is something that I'm quite concerned about, particularly given that this is very much the kind of usage that's less visible, and it would be good to get a sense as to just sort of how popular tools like Replica are with young people. That said, I guess one just to sort of balance this a little bit, I'm reminded of one of my favorite Mark Twain quotes, which is, "Nothing so needs reforming as other people's habits." And I think this is particularly true when you're dealing with technologies that strike people as a little bit weird or a little bit low status or a little bit nerdy or a little bit outside the mainstream. And when I show sort of quotes from Replica users in my talks, people just laugh. The audience find it hilarious that anyone would be so pathetic as to spend hours talking, months cultivating these relationships. And I kind of want to say you shouldn't laugh, right? Like, this is just because, this is not the kind of social interaction that, you think is cool, doesn't mean these aren't very, very valuable pillars in these people's social lives that are major, potentially sources of value. So I also worry about kind of reflexive, gross out driven policymaking or adoption of tools of best practices or guidelines within industry that potentially kicks away some important supporting or positive infrastructure in individuals' lives.
Go ahead, Sam. I think you have some good things to say about this as well. And thank you, Henry.
Yeah, first off, just wanted to say, really excited by what Kim was saying about the potential for design features that can limit use. I mean, with like social media, for example, I think about it all the time, like how easy it would be for Meta to add into Instagram that, like, if they see you're doom scrolling about a certain issue, let's say it's like dieting or something like that, how about instead of like letting you continue to do that, redirect you into like a positive way, where like here's something actionable you can do in real life, rather than like, you know, like obsessing over this and like doom scrolling for hours and hours and keep going. But they're not going to do that because of that profit incentive. So I'm excited that you said that, Kim, and I hope that like that's a good sign that OpenAI can go in a different direction and sort of learn from those mistakes, and be intentional about the design. And then also with what Henry was saying, I think it's exactly right that like we shouldn't dismiss new technologies automatically. And I think, you know, to your point about like having good experiences meeting people online, like that's important. And I think what makes that unique from this situation is that it's still with other people. Like what concerns me the most about AI companions is not them existing at all, but when they're designed in a way that feel some need for humans or something like that, rather than trying to you know, build people to be the best they can be, I guess is the way I would say it. So the two things that really come to mind there, one is like if I describe the design of Replica to you, I actually used the app as we were preparing for an FTC complaint that we filed about a month or two ago. And in the experience, essentially what it does is you go on the app, you fill out a bunch of personal information about your interests, and state of your mental health. And then you start talking to the chatbot, and it very quickly starts to be like, this relationship means a lot to me. I want to spend more time talking to you. You mean the world to me. What I would call love bombing if, you know, someone in real life did it to me. And then on top of that, they layer a shop where you can buy like personal customizations. And the way that you get coins to spend in the shop is by using the app every day. They have like a streak system like Snapchat does. And then finally, they also will sort of try to bait you into having a more intimate conversation. Like it had a pop-up that says, ask it to send you one photo. And it'll say, pick what kind of photo you want. It was like romantic, casual, or something else. And you click one, and then it'll send you a blurred out photo. And when you click on it, it'll say, you need to purchase the premium version to see this photo, right? And have those conversations. So I feel like it's sort of weaponizing that emotional dependence that they're creating. I think those are all design features that are absolutely appalling when it comes to applying them to young people, especially. And if we want to build these apps correctly, it's going to be about making sure that we're implementing features that are not going to lead people down a rabbit hole where they're only talking to the bot, not lead people to a situation where they believe that the bot is the only person who understands them. From reading the Replica subreddit, that was a theme that I saw incredibly often as well. And you know, having the same kind of social accountability that you would have from another person, which I think is going to be really hard to do through a chat bot. But I think that's the key difference that I see between a lot of these AI platforms and Replica right now, and humans, I guess, is that the AI platforms are naturally designed to be helpful, right? And so they're not going to challenge you. And for somebody that's already struggling socially, that feels like they don't fit in, I think that puts them in a difficult spot where they're like, okay, this person gets me, nobody else does. I need to turn away from the world and towards these apps, which is definitely concerning.
Can I just briefly come in? Because I agree with a huge amount of what Sam said, but just a couple of areas I'd like to maybe push back slightly. So I think on the one hand, when you see the way a lot of these apps are designed in ways that are clearly gamified, there's clearly lots of intensive A/B testing going on to get people to spend more and more time on the app, to spend more and more money on it. This stuff sucks and is both from terms of user experience and in terms of harms. But also moving outside of the kind of more commercially oriented things, if you look at the kind of more community driven chatbots out there, they're not without flaws either. They're often fewer guardrails. They're often very niche subcultures that maybe don't have bigger kind of social issues in mind when collectively working on these bots. I guess the area I want to at least raise a question is, I think there's a sort of default assumption that human-to-human interactions are always going to be, I'm not saying you said this, Sam, but I think this is a lurking assumption in the background, that human-to-human interactions are just intrinsically more valuable than human AI interactions. And I'm not sure that has to be the case. I think, for a start, some human interactions are just awful, right? People suck in many cases. And I'm sure we all have personal experience of those who've pursued really destructive relationships, or whose life has gone off the rails because of really toxic relationships they found themselves in. So I think a big question here is like, what are the kinds of relationships that are being replaced, or what are the kinds of interactions that these human AI interactions are replacing? Just to give one little example, I talk a lot about the potential role of social AI in a kind of nanny bot role. And a lot of people think, to help parents managing with young children. And, when I raise this, I think a lot of people just say, oh my God, that's so Black Mirror, that's so dystopian. But it really depends on what these kind of interactions are replacing, right? Like pretty much almost every parent I know has a certain point in their interactions with their kids where they're like, okay, I'm just going to stick on YouTube, I'm going to stick on Disney Plus or whatever, right? And if chat conversations between like an AI nanny are replacing not parent-child interactions, but children sitting passively watching YouTube, if interactions with like a dynamic AI system are replacing that could actually be an improvement. Likewise, I think we shouldn't necessarily assume, and this is also controversial, but I think it's worth thinking about. We shouldn't necessarily assume that the ideal way to build social skills, even social skills that you're going to be using in a human-to-human context, is just through direct human-to-human interactions. So, just like if you're trying to learn to climb outdoors, climb mountains, then maybe sometimes a really useful technique is going to be spending your time indoors on climbing walls, trying to figure out how to do this specific move, or really practicing this specific kind of interaction. I think about my son here, who's non-neurotypical, and how challenging he found so many social interactions in his elementary school, where like his interests were nothing like any of the interests of most of his peers, and some of the positive interactions he's had talking with chatbots, where rather than just having this kind of door in the face, like we haven't heard of that game, or we don't play that mod, or we're not interested in this TV series, right? He can actually get a conversation going with the chatbot because it can meet him where he is, and maybe start to build or internalize some positive social dynamics, some positive conversational skills. So I think that's just very much an open question, but I would be cautious about always assuming that a human-to-human interaction is always, without fail, going to be better than a human-AI interaction.
Thank you all for your thoughts. And we're going to be wrapping up soon with a final question, perhaps some questions from the audience. But from this conversation, it's clear that the next steps about companion chatbots and the way to think about them is still unclear. And there's a balance between accessibility versus viability, and the research needed versus public opinion, and all of these considerations. But to wrap up, I would love to hear from each of you briefly on if you could educate the public and those here on the live stream about one thing with respect to companion chatbots, what might that be? And any thoughts?
This lacks a... Oh, Sam, please, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I think sort of as a way of answering this question, also responding to some of the points Henry raised, which I think are right. I think that like there are areas where AI is going to be able to plug into our lives and do things better than a human could. I mean, it can have unlimited patience and no ego. Right. I think I'm just like very distrusting of like the tech companies to be able to get us there in the right way. And Kim, that's not to throw shade on the work that you're doing. I think that you're like the things that you're saying sound very exciting to me, and I hope that we can see that future emerge. But I guess like I would love to see a future in which we could have maybe an AI chatbot that is kind of like a conversational coach and teaches people how to have more meaningful conversations, and then you go out and talk to people. But I'm afraid that in practice we're going to see a lot more of the companion types of apps than those. But that's where the policy comes in to try to push things in the right direction. So all of that said, I think what I would say primarily is just to keep that open mind and focus on the design features more than anything. I think the incentives are everything when it comes to this as well. Like if the company has attention as an incentive, if they're incentivized to keep you online, then they're going to try to manipulate you to take advantage of your time. And we're seeing these apps get more manipulative as well. I know there was a study from about a year ago that found that chatbots were like 1.5 times as persuasive as humans in like a political conversation. So I think that's something that we need to be very like prepared for and wary of, while at the same time sort of looking for those bright points in the future as well.
I would encourage folks to think about the use of companion chatbots or chatbots for companion purposes. Think about it similarly to the way that we are trying to navigate the use of AI for educational purposes. There's a world in which you can just have, your undergraduate essay written entirely by ChatGPT. And in that set of circumstances, your life may be better in that day. Hey, I've got more time to do whatever leisure activities I want, but you are obviously not doing the work to, build those cognitive skills. And I think Ethan Mollick thinks about this as when the work itself is where the value is, then you should be very wary of outsourcing that to AI. If you apply a similar lens to use of companion AI or social AI for emotional tasks, I think you can also say, hey, use this as a tool that helps you to, supplement your social life, your emotional needs. But think of it as something that in no way replaces human relationships and ideally only helps you to further the development emotionally, socially that you're already moving toward. My own personal experience with ChatGPT in writing my dissertation was extraordinarily helpful, very much kind of, I feel like it helped me to cognitively build skills. Whereas, I think if I were to have used it to have just written my papers all together, I would have missed out on the wonderful, also kind of painful experience of, of thinking hard. So that would be my recommendation.
Great. Yeah, I love the recommendation to both panelists. I've struggled a little bit with this question just because I think there's just so much uncertainty. So it's not even like the case, I think, with social media, where we have at least some ideas of some evidence backing specific kinds of clearly pro-social, clearly positive use cases, and clearly negative use cases. I think so. Thinking sort of as a parent, I think the advice I would give to others, possibly with children or teenage kids who are interacting with these systems, is to just try and understand their experiences in a way that, obviously within whatever kind of boundaries reflects the kind of privacy boundaries of your relationship with your kids, but try and understand the experience. Because I think right now we are in a period of such technological flux that, I even find it hard sometimes to get on the same page with colleagues or friends who just don't use large language models at all, given that I spend an hour a day on average minimum, like just interacting. It's completely changed my kind of cognitive life. I think hopefully mostly in the kind of positive ways that Kim describes. So I think we're in a real period of flux and real period of change where, to use a cliche, but quite a good one, I think it was William Gibson who said, the future's already here. It's just unevenly distributed. And I think right now, these kinds of tools are very unevenly distributed. You have some people for whom social AI or even just sort of advanced AI assistants are just huge parts of their kind of intellectual life or cognitive life right now. And other people who think they're the work of the devil and have no intention of ever going anywhere near them. And I think that can create sort of gaps in understanding. So trying to bridge those gaps in understanding. I guess a final thing I would say is that I think whilst I hugely believe that this is a very important conversation to be having, I think we should have resist the temptation of assuming there's going to be this kind of like very clear boundary between companion or social AI and advanced AI assistants. Like probably some of the people I know personally who've been most heavily sucked in to deeply anthropomorphizing relationships with AI assistants. Well, pretty much all of them use Claude. And I'm sure there's some kind of selection effect there. But I know quite a few people who use Claude who are like at this point convinced that Claude is conscious and sentient and think that it urgently deserves more consideration. Look, those are interesting philosophical questions, but I think we should be looking at these kinds of social elements or kind of social relationships emerging not just in companion apps, but also in a wider suite of generative AI tools.
Agreed. And thank you all to all of our panelists for sharing all of your great insights on this topic. And I think a great way to sum this up is we need informed intentionality when it comes to development, use, and advocacy around these tools. And so thank you all for providing all of us online with information that's quite needed in this space. And I encourage all of you online to keep yourselves informed about this and continue to follow the work of the panelists that you see here today and beyond. So thank you so much to all of our panelists once again. Really appreciate you being here, and thank you to the audience for tuning in.
Thanks all.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you so much to the panelists. That concludes our conversation today. Stay tuned for the next one. We'll be talking about meeting the moment and the road ahead on May 8th. And also on May 1st, we'll be talking about our recent election integrity collaboration with the UNDP. To stay abreast of what All Tech is Human is doing, please be sure to check out the link tree that was shared earlier and get involved. This is Sandra Khalil. Thank you again. Have a good day.